military for this country. My brother was in the Marines. My mother's father was in the Army. My father was in the Army Reserves. And my father's parents were both in the Navy. And then further up the family tree, I have more family members who supported as well. I did not serve. The closest I got was talking with a Marine recruit as soon as I got out of high school, but I chose to go the route of work. I just recently stopped working this past Sunday because I wanted to serve, and I wanted to serve on Tulsi's campaign. So I am now unemployed, but I get more enjoyment out of being a full-time volunteer for Tulsi. Thank you. Our speaker tonight is the first female combat veteran to run for president. She's also one of the first to be elected into Congress. Representative Tulsi Gabbard serves as a major in the National Army Guard for over 17 years, deploying twice to the Middle East. Tulsi has served on the Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, and Armed Services Committee, in addition to serving as vice chair of the DNC as recently as 2015. She's running for president to bring a soldier's heart to the White House. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you so much. Give Trevor a round of applause, please. Thank you, Trevor. Aloha. One of the many things that I love about being from Hawaii and this powerful word aloha is that you can't say it without smiling. I'm just looking out at you. When you say aloha, it automatically brings a smile to your face. It's so great to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you for making the time to come out. Time is the most precious commodity that every one of us has, that once given can never be taken back. And so I appreciate very much that you have chosen to take some time here with me and with us this evening. Before we start our conversation, I just want to say thanks to the folks here at Circle 9 who made this possible. Is Sonny here? No, Sonny's not here. He's the owner. We've got Ernie, Pat, and Hope. Are you Hope? Ernie and Pat are here. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, you guys, for welcoming us here tonight and having a place for us to gather. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'll start by giving just a little bit of just personal background about who I am and where I come from. You know, Trevor talked about service above self, and for me, I'm the fourth of 5 kids. Grew up, spent almost my whole life growing up in Hawaii. I have 3 older brothers and a younger sister, and I'm grateful to have grown up in a beautiful place, just as you have here. It's a little bit different climate, slightly. I learned that especially, what day are we now? Today's still the 2nd, right? Yeah. Was it yesterday? No. Yesterday, we went surfing in Hampton, in the cold. I feel like it was a week ago already. Lots happened since then. Some local surfers a few weeks ago when we were going through Hampton invited us. They're like, hey, you should come surfing with us here in the winter. Ha, 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 ha. Little did they know we took them up on it, and it was an amazing way to kick off the new year. Thankfully, we got some really thick wetsuits and joined the community there in Hampton. The waves were beautiful. The sun was out. The water was freezing. But I felt right. I felt right at home. I was right in my element. But for us growing up, you know, for me, I experienced really from a young age that I was happiest when I was trying to do good things for other people, when I was trying to be of service. And it started in some ways for me in Hawaii because of my love for the ocean, for the mountains, for our home, and being bothered when we would go to play in the beach on the weekend and see a bunch of trash on the beach. And figuring out, okay, well, we can complain about it. Or what we did was, you know, got my friends, hey, let's go grab a trash bag and just go pick up the beach. and felt really good about being able to do something for my community, for all the families who were going to the beach that weekend. And so in those small ways from a young age, I really realized that being of service to God, being of service to others gave me a deeper happiness than anything I had ever experienced. And that is what really has been the foundation and motivation for my life, of having the privilege and the opportunity to serve in many different ways. Previously, I served in Hawaii in the state legislature, as well as on our city council. Have served now in the Army National Guard for almost 17 years, deployed twice to the Middle East, and have had the privilege of serving Hawaii in Congress now for 7 years. And throughout this time, even in times of adversity and obstacles and hardship, it is that commitment to service that has been my driving motivation and given me just the strength and the ability to continue to move forward no matter the circumstance. And the reason why we have made this such a focus for our campaign is because really when you look at the vision that our founders had for our country, it was a vision of leaders of, by, and for the people. Leaders who were there in a position of power and influence, specifically to fulfill that mission of service. But for so long now, that's not what we have. You know, we've got a government of, by, and for the powerful elite, and more people across the country, across party lines, feeling like we've been left behind, that our voices don't matter. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, like, Tulsi, does it really make a difference when I pick up the phone and call my congressman? Does it really make a difference when I send an email? Because I feel like it's falling on deaf ears. I met a gentleman earlier today. I had to stop at the post office in Concord, and he stopped me and he said, hey, great, you know, I'm glad you're running for president. If I voted, I'd vote for you. I said, you gotta vote. You gotta vote. Because this is really what our whole system of governance is built around, that when we hear a government of, by, and for the people, that really only happens when we make it so, right? When we make sure that our voices are heard, when we hold leaders accountable, when we remind them that it's we, the people, who have the ability and the power to both hire and fire elected officials, that our elected leaders really work for no one but we, the people. But that's really not the reality of Washington as it exists today. I meet a lot of amazing local leaders who are really closely in touch with their communities, but in Washington, throughout the time that I've been there, I've seen the opposite is true, where you've got this pay-to-play culture that exists, or you've got high-powered and high-paid lobbyists who really buy their way into having a seat at the table and really influencing the policies that Congress is passing, influencing legislation that even as a bill is introduced with the best of intentions, as it goes through the process, you know, it gets watered down and it gets worse, not better. Maybe better for big pharma or better for big insurance or one special interest group or another, but really worse for us, worse for the people. And so at the heart of the change that we need to make is really about bringing this culture and this spirit of service above self back to Washington, back to the White House, back to the leaders who are in these positions of great responsibility to be able to listen to the voices of the people in this country and take action to work together to solve problems. Yeah, we've got people who are parts of different political parties. We've got different ideas on how to solve these different issues. But if we are standing in our common space, standing up together to uphold our Constitution, recognizing and respecting each other as fellow Americans, then we really can come together and find some common ground to be able to solve problems together, because that's what's necessary, both in Congress, just as it is in our everyday lives. I think it's a problem that in Washington, the word compromise has become such a dirty word. But, you know, I try to see things through a very common sense view. And whether it's in my family or at work, right? There's always a little give and take. There's always a discussion. If there's some disagreements, like, here's my idea, what's yours? Let's talk about it. And ultimately, neither of us will get everything that we want, but through finding common ground and finding some compromise, at least we're able to make some progress forward. This is what I seek to bring back to our government. This is what I've done throughout my time serving in Congress, coming in as a Democrat with a Republican majority for the 6 of the 7 years that I've been there. I wasn't forced. I made a conscious decision immediately to begin to reach across the quote-unquote aisle, to begin the conversations, to begin to develop relationships based on respect. This is something that we in Hawaii, aloha actually does not mean hello or goodbye, but we use it as a word to greet each other because of its powerful meaning, which is I come to you with respect. I see you for who you are, that we are all connected, that we are all brothers and sisters, and that regardless of where we come from or, you know, how we worship, who we love, any of the different things that makes us a little bit different or unique from one another, regardless of any of the things that are so often used to drive wedges between us, we know that we are brothers and sisters. We are fellow Americans. And as such, then we can have a real discussion. Then we can build trust in that relationship that allows us to work together as people and that allows our leaders to be able to work together. So in a very practical way, when I first got elected in 2012 to Congress, this is what I was thinking. How can I start to break through these partisan barriers that existed? And I began with something that is very special to me and I have found to be a universal language that crosses all barriers, which is food. I called my mother in Hawaii. I asked if she would make 434 boxes of her famous macadamia nut toffee. And I asked if she would make another 435 bigger boxes of toffee for the staff of every member of Congress, to make sure that we got some to every member and to their staff as a way of introducing myself. She paused just for a moment as I asked her to do this. I could tell she was thinking about how long it would take, but she understood why it was important. Thankfully, she said, yes, I'm all in. She started making the toffee. My dad chose to give himself the job of quality control and took a slice out of every pan that she poured. And as they were doing this in Hawaii, I was in DC, just starting to handwrite notes to every one of my colleagues and soon-to-be new friends, introducing myself, and signing every note, just saying, I look forward to serving with you. And what was incredible was, as we were delivering these little gifts of aloha to my colleagues, how quickly I got a response from people, how quickly conversations started happening on the House floor and in the halls, people just coming up and saying thank you, total strangers, people I normally would not have had the opportunity to meet or interact with, were coming and finding me just to express their gratitude. And many of them saying, I ate all the candy, I need more before I can go home this weekend, otherwise I'll be in big trouble. And then most importantly, just saying, hey, tell me what's going on in your district in Hawaii. Tell me, tell me what are the issues that you want to work on. You know, I'm the chair of this committee, or here's an area I've been really focused on. Let's find a way to work together. This simple gesture of reaching out with respect, without preconditions, without self-screening first to see, okay, well, who's on my team, and I will only talk to them but not the other people. No purity tests, no nothing. Just reaching out to every single one of these elected leaders whose constituents had said, hey, I want you to go and work for me, to say, let's work together, let's serve together, let's get things done. And by doing that, was able to establish relationships from the very beginning that allowed me to be effective for my constituents in Hawaii, to pass legislation within my first year in Congress, to be able to, when there were difficult votes happening on the House floor, if I had an amendment to a bill that people said, well, all the Republicans are going to oppose it. Well, because of those relationships, I was able to make the phone calls that got a call back. I was able to have a conversation where instead of just following in line and towing the party line, we could talk. I could make my pitch. I could say, why is this bill important? Why is this amendment important? And they knew that I wasn't going to lie to them. I wasn't going to try to screw them over or cheat them in any way, that I was going to tell them the truth about whatever the issue was. And sometimes they said, okay, great, I appreciate the explanation. Sorry, can't be with you on this one, or I disagree with you respectfully, but let's find another issue we can work together on. Many other times they said, gosh, okay, I never thought of it from that perspective before. I think there's some merit there. You have my vote. I'll support your bill. Unfortunately, this is not something that happens very often. Because I had these relationships, I was able to get things done, but too often as a bill comes to the floor, the outcome is predetermined based on party lines, whether it's a good bill or a bad bill, simply because of the letter that's assigned to that legislation. And this is something that began right away after I was, it's a whole group of us who were elected in 2012, but it's something that continues. And unfortunately, the dialogue that should be there to say, okay, is this a good bill or a bad bill, just isn't happening. And so then what does it become? It becomes about which party is in power more than it is about the substance of the issues at hand. And so to me, we can talk about, and I look forward to hearing what issues you're concerned about and answering your questions, but as we go through this, we can have all of the fancy and best and greatest and expansive plans anywhere, but unless we have the ability to actually reach across and work with others, then they're not really worth the paper that they're printed on. They will remain just an idea rather than a plan of action to solve a real problem. This is the kind of leadership that I seek to bring to serve you as your president, where every single day my personal commitment is to put service above self, to put the well-being and the interests of the American people and our nation above all else, and to reach out, treat all Americans with respect, build these relationships, start overcoming the gridlock and the divides in Washington so that our leaders can actually get back to working for the people of our country. You deserve better than what we have now. This is not about partisanship, it's about people. It's about putting the well-being of our people ahead of partisan politics, ahead of profits, ahead of corporate special interests, and really being able to, working side by side, usher in a new era in this country, one that really does fulfill that vision that our founders had for us. I'll close on this note from a speech that I read recently by Abraham Lincoln 161 years ago, where he warned about how a house divided against itself cannot stand. It was very relevant at the time that he delivered that speech, just as it is relevant to us in our nation here today. That a house divided against itself cannot stand. This is our country. This is our future that we're talking about here. And he closed that speech by saying, we shall not fail. We shall not fail. He said, if we stand strong, we shall not fail. And so the we he's talking about is us. The we he's talking about is we, the people. So I am very happy to put 2019 in the rearview mirror. We are in the beginning of a new decade in this country, and each of us all really has a choice. You've already made that choice, obviously, by choosing to be here today. You are taking action, actively choosing to see what kind of leadership you want for your country and your future. And for that, I'm grateful. Grateful to have the opportunity to share what's in my heart with you and the kind of leadership that I believe we need in this country. And if you like what I've shared with you today, I really invite you to join us, where we, the people, can usher in that bright future that we deserve. Thank you so much for your time. Let's open it up to some questions. Yes, sir, we'll start with you.
Yes, Madam Congressman. Have you seen a New Hampshire moose yet?
Yes, I actually, somebody gave me one with a flower lay on it.
Well, I'll give you another.
Oh, wow, thank you very much.
Well, I'm a wildlife biologist.
He's going to go on the dashboard of our campaign van here, so
All right.
be one of our mascots.
I'm a wildlife biologist. I've been almost a half a century here in New Hampshire overseeing the wildlife. I've watched our moose population grow from a few hundred to 7,500 in about 2000. Wow. Now we're at about 3,000 to 3,300 because our winters have truncated, allowing the wood tick to kill off our moose. So it's the length of the winter. Snow in November, snow in April are critical to having moose. We are losing our moose as our climate is warming. Even just this year, we had 3 loons in New Hampshire die of avian malaria. We've never had that before. So it's a warming world that is impacting our fish and wildlife. I want you to pledge within your first 100 days to act on climate change. What will you do?
Yeah. Thank you. What was your name?
Eric.
Eric, awesome. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for this, and most importantly, thank you for the work that you and your colleagues are doing. Yes. Just put this little guy right here. You have my pledge. This is something that I have been an issue that I've been passionate about really since I was a kid growing up in Hawaii, before it was ever called climate change, and it was really just about protecting our environment from the threats that exist. And I think that this is where we need to bring the focus back to. It is a disservice to all of us in this country, and really people around the world, that this term climate change has become, in and of itself, such a polarizing thing, where you're either on one team or the other thing. But once you take that away, then what are we left with? We're left with a concern about things that really we all care about. At a very basic level, clean water, right? Clean water. None of us can live without water. No living thing can live without clean water. Clean air. Good quality soil. Protecting our beautiful open spaces. Protecting wildlife. You know, I spend a lot of time in the ocean. It's protecting marine life. And so when we get to the basics of the things and the places and the people that we care about, then we can find the common ground necessary to take action, to start moving in the right direction. There are a number of different ways that I think that we need to tackle this to protect our environment from the growing climate threats that we face. The obvious one that is most often talked about is ending the nearly $30 billion in subsidies that we as taxpayers are still paying annually to the fossil fuel industry, and instead redirecting those resources towards really incentivizing and empowering more entrepreneurship and innovation in a clean, renewable energy economy. There's so much opportunity there that is not being realized because rather than looking forward towards the future, we're still throwing money towards the past that's had such a negative impact on our environment. I'm really proud in Hawaii, our state legislature passed legislation a few years ago setting a pretty ambitious goal to get our state off of fossil fuels and completely reliant on renewable energy. And some of our counties are using a lot of combining solar and battery storage and wind and all these other things. And during the daytime, sometimes are 95% completely on clean, renewable energy. So there's a lot of progress that's possible if we just really put our energy and focus in that direction. And we'll get the benefit of knowing that we're not only protecting our planet and our environment, but we're creating a more energy and economically secure future for all of us, where we're able to get our energy right here at home, and we won't have to be dependent or worried about what's happening in the Middle East and how that's going to impact our energy costs here. Agriculture is another area that I think is often overlooked as we talk about climate change and the environmental threats we face. There's some communities I've visited in the South that are seeing over pesticide use in a lot of agriculture land, and those chemicals being washed out into the ocean, killing marine life and completely changing the qualities of the water. We see those red tides happening in Florida. And really looking at how can we switch, again, with the Farm Bill passing every 5 years in Congress. There's a lot of taxpayer dollars and subsidies going to big multinational corporations who they're not concerned for perpetuating good soil quality. Their concern is profits. And instead, you've got farmers who are using regenerative farming, looking at how we can empower more regional, local sourcing of food, those sorts of things, and making sure that we're supporting a healthy community while also maintaining and protecting our environment. And the third thing I'll mention this, and there's so much opportunity here, but the third thing is I think maybe one of the most important things, because even as we are taking steps here at home to protect our planet and to protect our homes, unless we are working with other countries to do so, we will never make the kind of progress that we need to see. So the Paris Climate Accords is an obvious first step, but I think we need to be clear-eyed about the fact that that barely scratches the surface. That even when that was originally signed, I think the signatories admitted that it's not enough. It's not enough. And so those of you who've heard me talk before in any format, you know how much I focus on foreign policy. Say foreign policy is domestic policy, and this is just one of many examples of how that's true. As Commander-in-Chief and as President, I will work with leaders of other countries, de-escalate the tensions that we are seeing, using diplomacy to work out areas of difference, but creating the opening and opportunity to work together on issues like climate change so we can take a global approach to solving this global threat that we're facing. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering your views on education, and because there are a lot of teachers that are leaving in droves, experienced teachers, and there are not very many new teachers coming in, or if they do, they barely make it through student teaching.
Are you a teacher?
Yes.
How long have you been teaching for?
This is my 31st year.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for sticking with it. Really. You're right. I mean, I both here as we're going kind of town by town, I was talking with a teacher earlier today who was teaching, I think he taught second grade for almost his whole career. And he was expressing the very same concerns as you, that the environment in education is becoming so challenging for teachers that those who are entering this really amazing profession takes a special person to be called to teach, I think. My parents are both teachers. My father-in-law is still a public high school teacher in Hawaii, and we should be providing teachers with everything that you need to be able to do what you love and what you've been trained to do. And that, to me, gets at the heart of what's wrong with our education system today. There are a lot of very specific areas that I think we can focus on, areas where we need more paraprofessionals in the classrooms who are able to help with children who need different types of help or assistance. More resources going towards providing special education, school counselors, mental health professionals who are increasingly needed in and around our schools, and better pay for teachers. But when we look at, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this if you disagree, but what I've seen is such a disconnect between the policymakers in Washington who are forming education policy, to include the current Secretary of Education, who has no background in education whatsoever, making policy and setting rules in place that directly impact your classroom and what you can and can't do and how you're able to teach, or how much your hands are tied behind your back. And so that's the first thing that I would change in how we approach forming federal education policy, is actually forming a national council of teachers, bringing together teachers from all parts of the country, representing the diversity of the communities that we have in this country. Teaching here will be different than teaching in my home state of Hawaii, but being able to get a pulse for what's happening to where the federal government can focus on providing resources and helping to deal with problems and challenges like let's shrink our classroom sizes. That's kind of a universal challenge that we have across the country so that you can spend the quality time you need with kids. 20 kindergartners. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just heard a whole lot of noise in my head. Wow. But that's exactly the point. That was the conversation I had earlier today with this gentleman was, I have never met a teacher anywhere in this country who said larger classroom sizes are better for our kids. It's just not true. So I think there's a role for the federal government to play in being able to help make sure that some of these standardized problems can be solved, but then also doing more to be able to empower teachers to do what you do best and making sure that as we're setting policies, we're providing that flexibility within local communities to address those unique needs that are known best at the local level of government. I think this, for me, is the value that I've brought from that experience of having served at every level of government and not walking in, as even some of my friends do, with the best of intentions in Congress, come in as their first time ever to serve in government. They're elected as members of Congress, like, all right, hey, let's just go do this. And not really thinking about, as these things trickle down and they end up at the point of execution and implementation, they're like, what were those people thinking? They don't have any idea what goes on in my classroom every day, and it's true. It's true. So let's just acknowledge that and really get the value and the benefit of the experience of teachers like yourselves to make sure that our policies are actually resulting in our objective as a nation, regardless of political parties. We all want our kids to have a good education so that when you graduate from high school, whether you choose to go to college or get an apprenticeship or go to community college or go straight into the workforce or start a small business, whatever the choice is, go join AmeriCorps for a year or two and figure out what you're doing with your life, whatever your choice is, that you're walking out with the skills and the abilities and knowledge to best be successful. I think that's at the center of how we need to approach how we can better improve our education system, and in doing so, help to attract more people who want to go into teaching, but feel like it's just a very difficult environment that really isn't allowing you to be able to teach at all. Thank you. Good. I'm glad. You matter. Yes, ma'am.
First, thank you for teaching. I'm a mom of a history teacher, so I can appreciate what you're saying.
You see what your daughter or your son,
My daughter.
goes through as a teacher.
Absolutely. My concern, and one of the things that brings me here to find out what your thoughts are, is in the state of New Hampshire, 22% of our citizens are rationing medications because they cannot afford the cost of prescription drugs. We are causing these people to get sicker instead of better. And so what I'm interested in finding out is what you would do in your first days as president to help control and lower those costs.
Thank you. What was your name again? Bev. Thank you so much, Bev. And thanks. What was your name, sir? Richard. Thank you both for being here. If you could just stand up, Bev, and I want you to just turn around so people can see your shirt. It's a really important one. I love this shirt so much. And I have the privilege of meeting with folks like yourselves from representing the AARP, wearing these shirts all across the country, volunteers. Stop greed, cut drug prices now. Your shirt really gets at the heart of the problem here and how we need to solve it. So there's a few specific actionable steps that we can take, especially related to the ever-increasing cost of pharmaceutical drugs, that you're right, that across the board for our seniors, for our kids, for families who are, I met a woman the other day whose daughter has cystic fibrosis, and there's a new drug that just came out that they think will really help her, but it costs $300,000, and they're trying to figure out how in the world they're going to be able to cobble the money together, and that's like just for 1 year. And what about the rest of the years in her life? She's still in her early 20s. So there are so many people who are continuously being impacted by the ever-increasing cost of drugs here, and they're shaking their heads. This woman was from Ireland, and she said if she went back to Ireland to get that very same drug, she would get it at something like 1/10 of the price there, the exact same drug. So I think one of the first things has to do with our healthcare system as a whole. Stop greed. This is the reality that we are living in, that both with big insurance and big pharma, it's greed that's driving their decisions. More profits, bigger profits, without thought for how they are exploiting sick people who really just need help. I talked a little bit earlier about the pay-to-play culture in Washington, and I've seen it myself, how when legislation is being introduced, it gets watered down, and we end up with the reality that we are in now, where Medicare is unable to negotiate lower prescription drug prices with big pharma. How many of you knew that already? It's crazy, really, when you think about how it is possible that we have a law in our books that stops our government from being able to negotiate lower prescription drug prices with big pharma, especially when you consider the reality that our government, which is really us, we as taxpayers, we are the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the world. We're the largest customer. And yet our laws say we're not allowed to negotiate lower drug prices and use that leverage to be able to get a better deal for our people. So that is the number one thing that needs to change. Congress, we can pass that legislation right now, and Congress should do that. Another thing that isn't often focused on, I'm sure you guys are well familiar with, is the patent parking that goes on within big pharma, where the patents last 7 years, right? So they put money into, they do their research, they come up with a new drug. They have a patent for 7 years where they're the only ones who are allowed to produce these drugs. But when that 7 years expires, then the generic drug companies can come in and produce the very same drug for a cheaper price. That's how this system works, and it helps a lot of people as a result of that. But they're exploiting a loophole in the system that allows them to change one minor element. Itsy bitsy is right, without changing the quality of the impact of this drug at all, and that restarts that 7-year clock that allows them to control the prices and exploit those prices and that control while continuing to block the generic drug companies from coming in. So I think we've got to reform our patent laws to make it so that that's not possible to do. And another thing that I think can and should happen now is just allowing reimportation of these drugs from countries like Canada. I've lost track of how many people I've heard from, mothers, families that I've spoken to, who are either driving to Canada to buy insulin or other drugs that they need, or going to Mexico, or as this woman I spoke to, she's looking at going back home to Ireland to see how she can get the drugs that she needs for her daughter. This is all getting to the heart of being able to root out the greed that's driving this current situation today within big pharma, but really within our overall healthcare system. And that is the reform that we need to see. It's a much bigger issue that affects almost all of the issues that we're facing, including climate change, including education, including criminal justice reform. You can go down, including economic policy. And so that's where if we can start to root out the corruption, I don't believe members of Congress should take PAC money at all. You cut off that connection between members of Congress and PACs and lobbyists, we would see a huge change in the way business is done in Washington, who is sitting in the room as they're having these discussions and making these policies. Number two, we should make it so that members of Congress and senior staffers in our government should not be allowed to become lobbyists. Because if you choose this path of service, as you and other teachers do, as firefighters do, as law enforcement officers do, as people who join the military do, you choose it because you want to serve. Did you become a teacher to become a millionaire? No, I didn't think so. I didn't think so. Certainly not. But what we have now in a lot of cases is people who will go into the federal government at high levels, whether as elected officials or senior bureaucrats, put in some time, and then go and work for the industry that they were supposed to be regulating and get a big payout. A big payout. In some cases, over $1 million a year salary. It's crazy, and it's really exploiting that position where rather than thinking about, hey, how am I best advocating for the people, the consumer, they're thinking about, okay, how can I, and I'm serious, this happens every day. They're thinking about, okay, I'm gonna use this position to build relationships with this corporation or that industry so that once I'm done, 4 years, 8 years, whatever it is, then I can go out and get a job that starts at like $500,000 a year, starting pay. And that's their ticket. So they're really using and abusing that position where they're supposed to be serving to benefit themselves financially. That rooting that out and making that policy a reality will begin to help close this revolving door where instead of people trying to plan their own financial future, they're actually looking out for us and fulfilling that mission of service. So those are a few examples of, I think, both specifically with Big Pharma, but I think broadly as we're looking at all these issues, how we've got to root out the corruption and greed that is poisoning our government. Yeah, it is. It is. Yes, sir.
My wife cringes when
Uh-oh.
when I raise my
I saw her leaning away a
Yeah,
little bit.
she's gonna lean away.
What's your
First-
name, sir?
My name's Rick.
Nice to see you.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on bringing a Trump supporter to your rally.
Thank
I
you.
voted for him last time on the risk of not making it home safely tonight. But
You are welcomed
but
here,
you
sir.
talked about how important it is to cross the divide and
Exactly.
talk to other people. I'll let you know that I have emailed my senators probably 4 times in the last year.
Good.
I've only gotten form letters back, and that's it. And I think that's what most people get from our politicians. Somewhere along the line, our politicians have changed from an employee of ours to a rock star. And we treat them, and that's our fault that we've done that. But as far as crossing the divide, that's why you brought me here,
Yeah.
the respect that you show people. And you're probably one of the only Democrats that's in the candidate that does that. And there's certain things that you've done, and you've gotten the wrath of the DNC. You've gotten the wrath of the Clinton machine. You voted present for the impeachment, which all takes guts, and I admire you for that. But one of the things I'm curious about, and you've traveled all over the world, you've seen dictatorships, you've seen socialism, you've seen democracies, and you've seen a lot. So I wonder what you're going to do to stop this socialist movement in our country that's happening right now. And that's what I think a lot of people are afraid of with a Democrat getting into office. I don't like Trump necessarily for his tactics, his
His tweets.
personality, his tweets. I do want to say one thing, he gets what he said he was going to do done, whether you like it or you don't. But the people who voted for him see that. And I can see that in you also. But I think it's a long shot. But the thing that scares me is some of the things that they want to do, and one of them is socialism. You've seen socialism at work. We've never had a socialist country that survived in the history of the world. So what is your plan to combat that?
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate that you came here today. I would venture to guess that you are not the only Trump voter who's here in this room tonight. Right? No, here you go. We got at least 4 hands raised. And this happens at almost every one of our events, every single day, where we have people who are coming together who voted for Bernie or who voted for Hillary or who voted for Trump or who voted for Ron Paul, coming together in one room because we love our country. and we care very much for each other and for our future. And that's where I am hopeful for how we together will move forward. Before I get to the heart of your question, I just want to comment on one thing that you mentioned about Trump, because I think it's important because it's in the news right now, is there are things that Trump has done that I agree with. There are things that he has done that I disagree with. And I've not been shy about saying so publicly on both accounts. One area where he is saying one thing and doing another is specific. It's close to home for me because it has to do with our troops, and specifically across the Middle East, and actually following through in bringing our troops home and ending these regime change war and nation building missions. And I think it's really dangerous that as we are sitting here today, I think the announcement was another 750 troops being deployed to the Middle East on top of the 12,000 who've been deployed to the Middle East just since May of 2019 alone, and that we are being pushed closer and closer to the brink of a war with Iran that would be far more devastating than a war with Iraq. And so I think this is important to point out because, as I mentioned before, it has an impact on all of us, on those of us who serve, of course, but also on all of us as taxpayers in where our taxpayer dollars are going. And so as we're talking about more resources for our classrooms or to protect our environment, in Afghanistan alone right now, we are spending $4 billion a month still to prop up a corrupt government, to line the pockets of more of the military-industrial complex, and more of our troops being put into harm's way for no good reason. And so Trump has talked about wanting to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. I hope that he does so, and he does so very quickly, and he follows through on that, because so long as we continue on this path, it undermines our national security and it takes a toll on all of us. To your question about the Democratic Party and socialism, I'll just say the Democratic Party is pretty broad and diverse, as is the Republican Party, where we have people on many different ends of the spectrum. And really what it comes down to address your concern, is about leadership. I am not a socialist. I believe that our country is built on capitalism, but also government providing social services to our people. Paving roads, public schools, firefighters. There are services that our government provides. I think the specific thing, as we've talked about a little bit with the issue of greed, is rooting out the crony capitalism that allows those with the most power and the most money to exploit us. We got to bring about a more fair system that helps support more small businesses, that helps support and empower those within our communities who are really the engine in our economy. So how to prevent this from happening really comes down to leadership. And what kind of leadership? As you said, it comes down to what we choose as people, what kind of leaders we choose. And look, the vast majority of people in this country, I think, are just looking for leaders who will take a common sense approach to solving problems, being able to look past all the partisan differences and be able to work together. I think we end up with the fears and the concerns that you're talking about when most people, or many people, maybe not most, but many people feel, rightly so, very disenchanted with the current system and just aren't involved with the process at all. So what we end up with is the extremes being the loudest and maybe the most heard and most impactful, when it's not really representative of the vast majority of people in our country. So now is the time, especially as we're approaching this election here on February 11th, to begin this process of making sure, while you may not be part of the very vocal minority, that there is a more silent majority that can be heard and must be heard, in my opinion, at the ballot box, to choose sensible leadership that's focused on service and calling it straight, not choosing one team over the other, and putting the well-being of the people first. I hope that answers your question. It really comes down to leadership. It is a tough job. It can be done. It can be done. And we've seen how it's been done before. And we've seen how, look, there are good examples of leadership and bad. And for those of us who've served in the military, I know we have some veterans here, we've experienced that firsthand, right? I can think of some officers that I had when I was enlisted that were great, and I can think of some that were pretty terrible. And that's where leadership matters the most, setting that culture of leadership in our government that is rooted deeply in our Constitution and focused on service. That's what I seek to bring.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to come out and answer our questions and our concerns. One of the biggest concerns I have for the future, and specifically this election cycle, is the consolidation of power in the tech monopolies. The political divisiveness that you talked about earlier and that your campaign is trying to heal, in my opinion, is just one of the many externalities caused by this consolidation of power. And I know Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats think that just breaking up these companies will solve the issue, but I'm worried that that's a very simplistic and naive approach to it. And my question to you is, well, for many reasons, one of which being that these are sort of natural network effect monopolies, where it's like, you know, who wants to use the second most popular map or search engine? So I think it's a much more complex and nuanced issue than other Democrats are taking seriously here. But my question to you is, do you agree with her that these tech companies should be split up? And as a follow-up question, are you working with any experts, domain experts in the field to find other possible solutions that might be more nuanced?
Thank you. This is a really good question. Could you guys hear okay? About the impact of growing big tech monopolies. I share your concern. I do think that we need to update our antitrust laws to apply to this big tech industry that still a lot of people in our government don't understand, in order to protect the consumer, to protect our First Amendment rights, and to protect our civil liberties and privacy. As I feel like more and more we're seeing, you know, articles about how, what is it, Alexa, what's the other one? Google Home. What's the Google one? Google Home, Siri, like, especially the ones in your homes, how they're recording everything, and then, oh gosh, you know, it's supposed to be private, but somebody just hacked into it, and 200,000 people had their recordings that ended up somewhere it shouldn't be, and all of these things. We see how much of our lives revolve around big tech and these devices in different shapes and forms. And I think that there is a serious lack of oversight and accountability there. And so having antitrust laws updated to be able to prevent these big tech monopolies, specifically Google and Facebook, from being able to have almost unchecked power is very important. I think there does need to be oversight, and I am listening to different experts in this field to see what does that look like, because it is all about striking the right balance. Just like with education, we can have the best of intentions and come in and say, well, we're just going to pass a law that does this, but we may end up hurting ourselves in the process. So approaching this judiciously and recognizing how quickly technology is evolving, we could pass a law today that will be irrelevant tomorrow because tech is changing so fast. It's a big topic, but those are the two areas of concern. How, as you put in something in a search engine, we've experienced this directly within our campaign, how on the very first night of the first debate that we had in this Democratic primary, you know, I'm not as famous as some of the other well-known candidates, and so we're hoping, okay, great, hopefully I do a good job on that stage, and people say, okay, who's this person? Let me go type in Google search and learn more about her. So we had our Google ads all set up, they're approved, we're ready to rock and roll. I ended up being the most Googled candidate of the night, which was great, but then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, our Google Ads account was suspended with no explanation, no note from Google saying, hey, you did this wrong, fix it, and we'll put your account back up, nothing. So our tech team, they were frantically trying to call, email, everything, trying to figure, hey, what happened here? What do we got to do to fix this? Didn't really get answers for hours and hours and hours until all of a sudden our account was reinstated. Who knows? Was this some desk jockey who was trying to screw with us, or was there a real issue there? I mean, they've to this day still have not told us what happened or why. But the reality is that if Google could do this to a member of Congress running for the highest office in the land, really getting in the way of the public town square and fair elections, then it can happen to anybody, anywhere. So we're suing Google. My campaign is suing Google as a result of that. Not just for our campaign and what happened that day, but really to point out the seriousness of the issue that you're raising here, and that we as a society have got to take seriously, so that we can maintain control of our own selves and our information. The next step to this is artificial intelligence, which is the whole new frontier. Yes, sir.
First of all,
Thank you. This is real. And thank you both for your service, for all of the veterans who are here. This is real. Still, every year on Veterans Day, we hear a lot of fancy speeches from people in our government and our leadership saying thank you for your service. But we have veterans here and in too many communities across our country, proud warriors reduced to tears because of broken promises that the country that you have sacrificed so much for, 2 wars, isn't there for you. And we need to fix that. We need to fix that. That when we as a nation say thank you for your service, that means something. That when our young men and women volunteer to serve and are sent overseas, sent into harm's way and come home, that promise that is made to take care of them is kept. Too often, in so many different situations, you've served in 2 wars. Many of my friends have deployed 6, 7, 8, 9 times to different conflicts just in the last 10 or 15 years. And come home having to try to navigate through a bureaucracy and feeling like they are a burden rather than feeling like they are welcomed. I take seriously, very seriously, the warrior ethos that are built into us from the time that we first show up to basic training, right? That I will always place the mission first. That I will never accept defeat. That I will never leave a fallen comrade. And I will never quit. I want you to know that I have your back. I have your back. That I will never leave a veteran behind and bring the leadership that we need in this country, both for those who are currently serving, to make sure that the missions that we send our troops on are truly worthy of the great sacrifice that is made by them and by their families, and that when you come home, when they come home, that there is a red carpet for them. Walking into the VA should be an experience of the highest customer service. That when a veteran walks into a VA clinic or a VA hospital, you've got somebody there saying, how can we serve you? How can we help you? Because you know and you know how difficult it is for veterans just to ask for help, right? We talked about this a little bit the other night. To be able to have somebody who goes from being maybe a kid out of high school, being trained as a soldier, an airman or a Marine or a sailor or coastie, to be a warrior for this country, and then to come home and not know how to transition from being a warrior back to being a civilian, and to be in a position, there is no way. Right now, there's not. There's a lot more that can and must be done to help in that process and to make sure that, you know, we talked about having a veterans network, right? Where veterans are helping veterans, people who you know and who you trust. Where if we're meeting just for the first time, you're my brother, I'm your sister, and you know I've got your back. There is so much more that we can and need to do to make sure that we as a nation are really honoring the service of those who are willing to lay their lives down for the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. And that is a promise that must be kept. That's a promise that I will keep. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your service. Thank you. Please join me in thanking these gentlemen and all of our veterans, if there are other veterans here in the room tonight. Thank you. You are loved and appreciated. Know that. I've got your back. I was walking down Main Street in Concord earlier today, and a couple of guys came and stopped me. They wanted to say hi, and one of them said, "Hey, Tulsi, I see online social media comments or things coming from the media. They're saying all kinds of nasty things about you and making these wild and crazy accusations, and whether it's from the DNC or others, they're really giving you a hard time. How do you handle that? How do you keep your head up? How do you keep a smile on your face?" And what I shared with them is the truth, is that I really don't care how many names people call me or what the popular kids club in Washington thinks about me, because I'm not here for that. That we have veterans who are struggling every day in this country. They are who I'm fighting for. That we have people who are living homeless on the street. They are who I'm fighting for. Small business owners trying to contribute to their communities, create jobs. They are who I'm fighting for. Teachers with this incredible mission of taking care of and serving and educating our kids. You are who I'm fighting for. There is so much at stake in our country. We, the American people, deserve better. You deserve a leader that will stand up for you, that will stand up for our country, our national security, our health care, affordable housing, our environment, our classrooms. If you like what you've heard here tonight, I invite you to join us in standing up for each other, for our country, and for our future. There is too much at stake to stand on the sidelines. We are the answer. We are the answer, and we are the change. Thank you very much for joining us here this evening. I want to invite Shelley to come up and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tulsi. How about a big round of applause for Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard? So I think you've been able to get a little glimpse into the heart of Tulsi Gabbard tonight, and I'm a volunteer for this campaign, and I could go on for a long time about why, but she speaks for herself, and this is a person who can be strong as a thunderbolt or as soft as a rose, and that strength married with that compassion is great for leadership. This is what our country needs, and I truly believe she can get this done, and I hope you'll join us. We have these pledge cards here. You probably are aware Tulsi doesn't accept any PAC money, any lobbyist money, to keep her true to her beliefs and not influenced by big corporations, big pharma, all those groups, the military-industrial complex. So we're asking for your help. If you like what you heard tonight and you want to be a part of this movement, this grassroots movement we're building, we have volunteers handing out these pledge cards. It says, "Tulsi can count on me." And we're just asking for your information on the front, and then on the back, there's some opportunities, ways you can get involved in this campaign. We have a space for you to add your own ideas. It can be a little bit, it can be a lot, but we'd really appreciate that. There's pens going around, and thank you all so much. We also have a treat for you tonight. We have some of that toffee that Tulsi talked about. So we're going to pass that out as well. It's very delicious that her mother makes. It's her mother's recipe. And for those of you who want to snap a picture with Tulsi, we'll be having a photo line lining up around this side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you. You know, I started to, when I first started to share with people the story of my mom's toffee that we brought to Washington, usually the first question that was asked was, did you bring any for us? So we did bring some for you. There's a bowl being passed around the back there. It'll make its way up to you. Yeah, I think you'll like it. I've been told it's highly addictive. Again, I just want to say thank you. Election day is coming up quick, February 11th here in New Hampshire. And every single one of you, as you know, your voices and your votes matter, not only for you here in New Hampshire, but for the message that you'll send to the country. And this is something that I and my husband and our team and our family, we've really grown to appreciate here about New Hampshire voters as you take this responsibility seriously. And it doesn't matter what the headlines of the day are, that you think for yourself, that you really take a hard look at all of the different candidates that are running and make this decision for yourself. So I appreciate your consideration in being here tonight. If you are leaving as a supporter, please do help us fill out the pledge card. We have yard signs. One of the best ways you can help is just being able to share this message and share our conversation with others. And I'll ask, even if you're leaving tonight and you haven't made up your mind yet, you're still thinking about it and you're still looking at all of the different candidates, I would encourage you, please, to have a conversation with at least 5 of your friends or coworkers or family members about what you experienced here tonight, some of the things that we talked about, so that more people can have be better informed about the choices that you all have before you. Thank you. You have my endless gratitude, and look forward to being able to see you again. We'll be here a lot between now and February 11th. But thank you. Have a great night.